Today is Sunday, September 2nd, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Boston Celtics. I'm Adam Kaufman, and episode 278 featuring the sporting news NBA writer Sean Deveney is brought to you by RX Bar. My listeners get 25% off their first order by going to rxbar.com/CelticsBeat. Show's also brought to you by Boston Barber. Every neighborhood has a heartbeat, a place that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core. In Boston's historic North End, that place is Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. Boston Barber and Tattoo Company has become home to A-list Boston celebrities like Gordon Hayward, Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand, Aaron Baines, and others. Boston Barber and Tattoo is more than just Boston's most well-known corner barber shop. It's also a tourist attraction for the hundreds of thousands of people that visit the North End throughout the year. Boston Barber and Tattoo, a North End landmark that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core, located at 113 Salem Street. All right, welcome in. I got good news, I've got bad news. The bad news first is summer is almost over. I know, stinks. Kids going back to school, maybe a little more free time for you parents, but the nicer weather, it's only going to last so long, and eventually it's going to get dark earlier, all that crap. But the good news is it's September, and that means training camp, and preseason action will be here later this month. Finally, basketball to look forward to, and the best news we could have possibly hoped for from Danny Ainge in a chat with ESPN's Chris Forsberg. The Celtics president of basketball operations said that Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward are healthy and ready to go. Here specifically is what he said. I don't want to hype it up too much, but I'm saying if our training camp were starting today, they would be here today going full speed. It's not like they need an extra month. I think that they know they have an extra month, so they're sort of pacing themselves. They're playing as if to build up to that opening day of training camp, which, by the way, September 26th. So again, it's a few weeks away. Ainge went on to say they'll both be here in the next week or so by the time Labor Day's over, which means basically now. They'll be playing 5-on-5. I think it's just a matter of time if they're not playing 5-on-5 now, and then only because they want more of a controlled environment, I guess. They're doing everything, dunking the basketball off of both legs, playing one-on-ones live, jumping, cutting, defending. I'm excited for them. Well, you know what, Danny? I'm excited too. I think everybody is excited. Hell, Terry Rozier at his basketball camp last weekend, he knows that for this team, favorites to win the Eastern Conference, to reach the NBA Finals, damn it, maybe win a championship, expectations are high.
Yeah, I don't want to try to predict nothing crazy, but, we look good on paper. You see all the same team back from last year, then add the two main guys, two main pieces with a lot of guys that we added from this draft, and, we signed. So it was special. It's special. It's special. And like I said, I don't want to talk too much about it. It's going to be a special year.
Well, I want to talk about it. I want to talk a lot about it. I want to hear from you guys. You can always find me on Twitter at Adam M. Kaufman. You can pay close attention to whenever these guys have their appearances. Obviously, when the season gets going and you've got practice and games, pregame, postgame, coach speak, all that stuff, you should subscribe to the CLNS YouTube page because all of that stuff will be there. The content's terrific. Our video team always out there. And on top of that, the show. It's all about the show. Subscribe to Celtics Beat on iTunes. Leave us a rating. 5 stars always appreciated. Leave us a comment. Tell me how great you think I am, or at least how great you think the show is. Really, that's more significant here. And you can also get them on Twitter, on Stitcher. The shows are everywhere, and I throw them at you constantly. But again, subscribe. I appreciate it. Let's bring in Sean Deveney, covers the NBA for Sporting News, and of course has a particular interest in the Celtics, as I think we all do. So let's go right into it, Sean. Healthy Irving, healthy Hayward, was talking about that before. What's it really mean, though, in terms of their expectations for this season, particularly the first half? Because I think that's the element of this conversation that we're not talking enough about.
Yeah, obviously, on paper you step back and you look and you see the talent level and they should be an NBA Finals team. I think everybody would agree with that, especially given what happened in the East in the off season with LeBron leaving, and this should be an NBA Finals team. But there's just so much to work out when you start really looking at the minutes and how you divide up 240 minutes among these players. That's where you get into the tricky thing, and that's where I thought a lot of folks thought that there would be a move of some kind for the Celtics here in the off season, a trade to kind of loosen some of the log jam of minutes. that we're going to see. But, obviously they're thinking, well, let's go into the season with this, and if we need to make changes during the year, that's something we can address. So, I think you're right. The first half of the season and how all this comes together, how quickly it comes together, it's going to be a completely new team, and they're going to have to iron out some real issues in terms of how those minutes are distributed, and they have to do it quickly.
I think on the whole, that's all entirely fair. And in terms of the individual minutes, especially for those guys coming back from injuries, I mean, Hayward could be playing 20 minutes a game conceivably, depending on how everything's going off of that leg injury. It's all well and good that we hear he's completely healthy right now, but training camp hasn't started yet. Preseason games haven't begun, so we need to see him out there, same as the organization does. Irving, maybe he plays 25 as opposed to the 30 that he played last year because he's coming off of something. And that's really kind of where I want to zero in, because it's these two guys that I think, on paper you just look at them and say, great, Irving's back, Hayward's back, there's 40-plus points per game in your lineup. Well, is that the case necessarily right out of the jump? I mean, second half of the year and come the postseason, sure, but immediately off the injuries, first action in quite a while. Irving hasn't played since last March. Hayward hasn't played since last October. What are these guys going to be when the season begins?
Yeah, and I think that's where they can afford to work things slowly. Maybe not play them in back-to-backs. They don't have a ton of back-to-backs in the early part of the year, but you could certainly imagine Hayward, sitting out in the second half of a back-to-back, and maybe the same with Kyrie as well. And certainly letting some of those young guys get minutes in those cases. But yeah, I don't think you can immediately say Gordon Hayward is going to be Gordon Hayward after missing an entire season and still having to, whenever you talk to a guy who's been injured that way, with that kind of injury that just looks so terrible, and you can only imagine what it sounded like to him, and all those things. There's a fear element, and you don't really trust your body until you've played, at least a month or so, probably a little longer than that. We're just afraid that it's going to happen again, and that's just a human thing. And so, I think that's going to be something to watch for with Gordon Hayward, and with Kyrie. You just the knee is something that you wouldn't blame him for not trusting. It's something that has let him down in the past. The procedure that he had shouldn't be something that lasts into this year. But again, it becomes sort of a how much do I trust my body kind of thing. So I think that those two guys certainly are going to be given some time to get themselves reacclimated, and that's where having the depth is going to pay off, and maybe you can work the minutes thing that way. But eventually, there's going to come a time where those guys are playing 30-plus minutes, and someone's going to have to sit.
So obviously we both sit here and highlight the fact that, as you said, Gordon Hayward may not be Gordon Hayward right when the season begins for all the reasons you outlined. But let's talk out of the other side of our mouths here for a second. Do you believe, because I do, that people are underrating or underselling Gordon Hayward's importance to this team and this roster? Because it really seems like, having not seen him in a year, obviously, that people have forgotten how good he was that last year in Utah before he joined Boston and got hurt.
And he's a guy, and this gets overlooked with him quite a bit as well. He's a guy who got better every year of his career. For the first 7 years he was in the NBA, he got better every year. You'd be hard-pressed to find a guy who improved for the first 7 years of his career. He always found something to work on and something to make himself better at, whether it's, three-point shooting, ball handling. On the defensive end, he's a much, much better player than when he first got into the league. He's a guy who's really worked to get better and better as he's gone along, and there was no reason to think that wouldn't be the case coming into Boston, that he wouldn't be a guy who was a 20-plus point per game scorer and a guy who's going to shoot near 40% from the 3-point line. That's such a, you think about the team last year and how they were let down at the 3-point line from time to time. If you could imagine having Hayward in there and the number of open looks he would have gotten, surely he probably would have shot well above 37, 38%, probably into the 40s. That would have been such a big lift for that team in terms of how they played and their ability to create open shots for guys. They just didn't have that many guys who were reliable at knocking those down. and Hayward is a guy who can do that. So, yeah, both for the system that they run and for the fact that, like I say, Hayward has just gotten better every year in the league. There's every reason to believe that if he were out there, that they would have been the Eastern Conference champions.
Well, and of course, the familiarity with Brad Stevens and the history they have, and as you said, that system. I mean, it's something that we were so excited about when he signed in the first place. It's like, all right, Butler now at the NBA level.
Quick break from Adam and Sean to tell you today's show is brought to you by RX Bar. In 2013, the founders of RX Bar called BS on the protein bar industry. None of the protein bars in the market really gave you what you actually really need out of a protein bar. They were full of artificial ingredients, fillers, and preservatives that flat out aren't healthy for you. That's why RX bars are different. Each bar speaks for itself right on the front of the package. RX bars are made with egg whites, dates, nuts, fruits, unsweetened chocolate, things that are actually good for you. And now they have a whole new line for your kids. Adam talks about this all the time. As a parent, you have to compromise when it comes to what your kids snack on. Those bars, the kids' ones, are a little bit smaller than the adult-sized ones. The texture a little bit softer. The nuts a little bit smaller. But each packs the same great punch as the adults ones. Use them as a snack for after school or make it a part of what's inside their lunchbox. I get like 40 or 50 of these shipped to me. They are, well, I love all of them. I still have a couple left. But the kids' ones, I was all over the PB&J ones. They were excellent. But the adult-sized ones, anything with like fruit, nuts, and like berries in them, get those. Absolutely spectacular. What are you waiting for? Get yours today. Listeners to this show get a special offer. Just go to rxbar.com/CelticsBeat. Use the promo code CelticsBeat to get a pack of 6 adult bars, 4 kids bars for 25% off. It's 25% off your first order. Go to rxbar.com/CelticsBeat and use the promo code CelticsBeat at checkout. Back to Adam and Sean.
This is just one element of something that obviously when everyone's healthy and everyone comes back later this month for the start of camp that we're going to be looking at and talking about. What do you think are the biggest stories that we should be talking about come training camp for the C's?
Yeah, I think it's going to be sacrifice, and that's the thing that I think in Boston we've seen it before where players have come and they've sacrificed. When you had Ray Allen and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, but of course the thing was, those guys were veterans. They'd already done a lot, and they wanted to win. You've got guys now who are in their early 20s who are still trying to prove themselves, and it's a matter of whether they can sacrifice. And I think that's going to be, to me, that's going to be the big thing is, can Terry Rozier accept that and be somebody who sacrifices it, because he still hasn't really established himself in the league. He still really hasn't shown that he can do what we saw in stretches last year consistently over 82 games. Same thing with the Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. So I think that's probably that's going to be the big thing is can those young guys put their own and it's tough to do with the guy who, like I said, hasn't really established himself in the league, hasn't been to an All-Star game, hasn't been an All-NBA type player. That's going to be the real challenge, and whether those guys are willing to accept that.
That word, sacrifice. I mean, we've heard Rozier say it. Other guys say it. Members of this team as well. Brad Stevens may be behind the scenes. He's already preaching it. We don't know. We certainly know he will become the start of camp. But do you think there's going to be a bad apple in the bunch who's maybe more concerned with his minutes or his role, his next contract, than Banner 18? Yeah,
the thing about that, Adam, is sometimes – I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad apple. It's not as though, just because you want to be able to go out there and show what you can do, you haven't had the chance to do that. That doesn't necessarily make you a bad apple. And I think that's one of the things that they're going to run up against is, like I say, if you're 30 years old, if you're 33, if you're 30, if you're in your 30s, like Pearson and Ray Allen and Garnett were, then you kind of get it. But at 23, it's tough to understand that. Certainly at 20 or 21, it's even tougher because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know yet, and that's what the challenge is going to be with these guys. Is it's hard to understand sacrifice if you haven't been to a place where you've been as good as you can be. where you know how good you can be. So, it's not necessarily a bad apple thing. It's just natural that a guy like Rozier or Tatum or Brown, they're going to still want to show, hey, look, this is how much better I can be, and that might be to the detriment of the team. It doesn't mean that they're trying to play for a contract or anything. It's just a natural thing that at that age you want to show what you can do, and that's something that is going to be tough to tame and tough to keep under wraps. Like I say, in the early part of the year, I wouldn't be surprised to see some strategic games off for Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Not just because you want to get those guys some rest, but just because you want to, you want to keep Jaylen Brown and Tatum and Rozier. You want to keep those guys engaged, and that's one way you can do that is giving them, days where they have 35 minutes and they know they don't have to worry about going to the bench.
Well, and I think that's going to happen a lot, but you can't ignore, obviously, the financial component to this. You talk about, say, Tatum and Brown. Those guys contractually don't have anything to worry about this specific season. They're under contract, and so they're not up for anything. Now, maybe from a, marketing or endorsement perspective, of course, it's great to go out there and shine. We've already seen Brown traveling the globe and doing his thing and getting a whole lot of attention for it for good reasons, and activist and very socially conscious. We've seen Tatum, in the now Nike commercial, turning it back to the 90s and all of that. So he's getting out there. But as far as Rozier goes, he's saying the right things, that he's comfortable taking what effectively is a major step back statistically in his role this year, provided that has to happen, meaning Irving's healthy and the minutes aren't going to be there the same way they were, and Smart still has to play the Smart role. If Irving plays 70-plus games, building in maybe some time off for rest or injury or whatever else, how much is that going to impact Rozier as an RFA next summer? I mean, how much, if he's not traded sometime between now and when he becomes a free agent, how much is money going to be at stake for him if he's not doing what he did last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a concern, but if you're looking for a positive in terms of if you're Terry Rozier's agent, if you're Terry Rozier, or even if you're the Celtics, I think that you can look ahead and you can see a summer next year where you're going to have a lot of money available. So it was a little cold out there for restricted free agents this past year. Some of them got taken care of pretty well, but it
like
wasn't
Marcus Smart.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Eventually,
right.
anyway.
And Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon. Some of these guys got better deals than I think most of us would have expected. But still, you can see a guy like Rodney Hood and what he's dealing with. As far as being a restricted free agent next summer, I think you're in a pretty good position. And I think Terry, what he's got to realize, and what you hope that he realizes, if you're the Celtics, that he's already forged a reputation among other teams, so that if he goes out and he does his role and he plays what they ask him to play, he does the things that they ask him to do. Other teams were watching the playoffs last year; they know what he can do. And other teams saw when Kyrie was out what he did, triple double and things like that. So other teams are, he's already got a bit of a reputation there. So if he plays less and doesn't put up the minutes, I still think that given his age, there's going to be teams out there who are going to have money next summer who are going to be willing to pay him. Now, if you're Terry Rozier, do you understand that? Do you know that that's going to be the case, or do you still feel like I want to prove more so I can get paid more? That's going to be the tough thing with him. But certainly, what he ought to understand is that he's already set himself up for a pretty good contract. Whether it's in Boston, probably not. But if it's elsewhere, there's going to be teams that'll be very willing to sign. I believe he'll be 24. 24-year-old point guard who has done the things that we've seen him do.
Well, Sean, as we know, nationally, nobody's talking about Terry Rozier and his financial future and where he's going to be playing a year from now. It's about Kyrie Irving. Everybody's fixated on that, which to me, honestly, kind of a waste of time, since nothing's going to happen between now and when he's eligible for a new deal next summer, unless there's like a 1% chance of this, Danny Ainge gets spooked come the trade deadline, thinks, boy, I think there's a better chance of me losing him than re-signing him, and he decides to trade him so that he doesn't walk out the door for nothing. Maybe, just maybe, that's a possibility, but I think we'd agree highly unlikely. So everybody wants to discuss Kyrie, especially since Kyrie won't. Adrian Wojnarowski said on his podcast he believes it's Boston versus the field. I believe that as well. I've been saying it a while. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who believes otherwise, except for, some of the Knicks truthers that are out there. But where do you land on this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they have the kind of year that we expect, and if things go smoothly and if he's healthy, then I would expect him to sign a long-term. Look, the Celtics didn't make the deal for him last summer in order to lose him, 2 years later. So, I think you're going to get the full court press from the Celtics. It's just a matter of whether Kyrie and we know, Adam, Kyrie's a bit of an odd duck. He's got his own drummer that he marches to. So, it wouldn't be surprising to see him necessarily, make a choice that nobody's expecting at this point. But certainly, I think going into this year, he's highly likely to re-sign with the Celtics. It's just a matter of how things play out this year. And talking about Rozier, that's one of the reasons why the Celtics still have him. Is I do think that they consider him an insurance policy. Yeah. Obviously, if there was the right deal that had come up in the last month and a half, then they might have moved Terry. But I really do think they look at him as the insurance policy for A, Kyrie's knee, and then B, for Kyrie, like I say, making a surprising decision. The fact that Terry's going to be restricted next year gives the Celtics a little bit of a cushion. So if Kyrie does leave on July 2nd, the Celtics will still have some time to make their offer to Terry Rozier or to match something if he gets an offer from another team.
On the whole here, Sean, if we look at the Celtics since Brad Stevens' arrival, and I'm doing these numbers off the top of my head, so I think I'm right, but if I'm wrong, if you know, correct me, whatever. But the win totals under Stevens have gone from 25 to 40 to 48 to 53 to last year was, 57, I think it was, or maybe it was 55, something like that. And now there's two reasons for that. One, obviously, with each year, talent has increased on this team, and that's why most people think that this team is going to win 58, 60, whatever games this year. But the other reason, ever since Stevens got here, the culture with this team has been that routinely they're among the hardest working in the league. They don't have to be this year, though. They don't have to push. They're going to have those rest nights that we talked about, the nights off, minutes restrictions, whatever it may be. I can't help but wonder a little bit, now that they're at this level, a championship caliber level, will the effort level for this team on a night-to-night basis feel as it was the last few years?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think that you'll get and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that you'll get a sense of this team understanding what the grind is going to be in April and May. They want to play deep into June. So I think there will be a sense of pacing themselves. One thing about Brad that I think gets underrated is, the way he deals with players right now is much different than it was in 2013. That's one of the biggest things. If you talk to players in the locker room or agents of the players, when he first came in, he wasn't very good at sort of dealing with NBA players, and it makes sense. I mean, he's a college coach. He's a little unsure of the approach and things like that. So there was, some trepidation there in terms of how all that would. I think he's gotten more and more confident. I think, he's a guy who talks to every coach that he can, tries to get every bit of information. And I think that the way he deals with players in terms of communication, in terms of them understanding what their role is, that hasn't always been great in the early part of his tenure with the Celtics. But I think if you talk to players now, you talk to agents who have had players in Boston, they'll say that he's much more of a straight shooter. He's much more confident in terms of how he deals with players, and I think that that's going to show in terms of how they approach this season. And do we need to go all out for a win in the depths of January? When we're thinking about playing in June. So I do think that you do have to take your foot off the gas a little bit as a coach if you're trying to manage energy level and focus and things like that. And I think that that's something that I'll be curious to see if he does that. I would expect that he will. I will expect that he'll talk to a guy like a Steve Kerr over the course of this summer and get some pointers on that just in terms of how you manage the day-to-day when you want to be playing in early June. That's something that I would expect to see him take seriously this year.
Well, maybe it relates to that. I would think it would. The thing that everybody's wondering, obviously, Sean, is how do the Celtics stack up against the Warriors? Because these are the teams that most people project to meet in the NBA Finals, much as over the last several years it was just assumed it would be the Warriors and Cavaliers because of LeBron, and that always played out. Golden State obviously has the pedigree. It has the experience, upper echelon talent, even more so, I think a lot of people would argue. But overall roster versus overall roster, how do you compare the two?
Well, the Celtics have played well against the Warriors the last few years. They've done a good job. You could go all the way back to when Brad Stevens was at Butler and Curry was at Davidson, and Brad Stevens forced Steph Curry into one of his worst years as a junior and one of his worst games. That junior year. So Brad Stevens always has done a nice job in terms of taking Steph Curry out of the mix. Now the overall roster of the Warriors, of course, is much deeper than that. And that's been the real trick in terms of trying to defend them. But I think that, and I thought this last year, even without Hayward and Irving, that matchup wise, the Celtics would have been a better matchup for the Warriors than Cleveland was. And I say that because, if you're going to keep up with the Warriors, you need to do some of the things that they do. You need that versatility on the defensive end. You've got to be able to switch everything. You can't leave them with open shots. And if you've got, a mobile big man like an Al Horford, doesn't love going out and defending the 3-point line, but he can do it. If you've got that, if you've got a guy like a Jaylen Brown with the length that he has and the defensive intelligence that he has, he'd be a pretty good matchup against that Warriors team as well. So, you can go through and there are things that the Celtics can do. They've got to be a better 3-point shooting team, and I think they will. But yeah, I think that when you look at what the Warriors do and what the Celtics do, I think the Celtics would be a pretty good matchup. I don't think they could beat the Warriors in a 7-game series, but I think it'll be much more interesting than the finals we've seen the last 2 years.
You need to get there. That's clear. Are people who, I don't know, I fall in this category. I don't know if you do, but I'm curious. Are we taking the East for granted? Will the Raptors and Sixers present more of a challenge to the Celtics than most are willing to admit?
No, I take it for granted. Yeah, I just think that I'm not a big believer in Kawhi Leonard going in and single-handedly turning around that Raptors team and making them a team that can win in the playoffs. They've got a new coach. They exceeded what their roster should have been last year. I don't know that they can do that again. And there's going to be a lot of other noise around that team that, again, it hasn't been the toughest team in terms of between the years. When you look at Toronto and how they've performed, especially obviously in the playoffs, but even before that, they're not a very tough team. And with a rookie coach and this new guy coming in, I just don't think that that's going to be an immediate success. So I think that I'm not a big believer in Toronto as a real finals contender, and I just don't think the Sixers did enough. If you have a healthy Embiid, then that's great. If everybody else is healthy, but I think they still needed that other piece. They certainly tried to get another piece, but they came away with Wilson Chandler. And somebody, Mike Muscala, that. I don't think that puts them over the top there. So, I guess maybe I am taking it for granted, but I just look and I don't see a team that's nearly as good as the Celtics there.
Well, not to mention, obviously, what they showed in the playoffs against the Celtics last year when they were pretty much fully healthy. Not everybody, like Fultz wasn't what most people expect Markelle Fultz is going to be, but still the Celtics were so severely undermanned, and Sixers, while there were close games, I'm not going to say they totally rolled over, It was still a 5-game set without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, I mean, you would have expected the Sixers to have a couple of double-digit wins in there. Just given, just given what the fact that they had some home games and that they were in much better position in terms of their health and their depth. And really the Celtics were able to outplay them in the final 2 minutes of just about every game there, and that was really the difference. That I think is not just luck. Obviously, there is a luck element there when you win close games like that. But I also think there was much better coaching and much more intelligent play on the part of the players themselves. Much better execution. You think of some of those plays that Al Horford had late in some of those games, for instance. I think the Celtics showed that they were a smarter team than Philadelphia. I'm not sure that changes going into next year.
Well, and Brett Brown's still there, so obviously, starts at the top for better or worse. One more quick break to tell you, every neighborhood has a heartbeat, a place that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core. In Boston's historic North End, that place is Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. Boston Barber and Tattoo Company has become home to A-list Boston celebrities, Gordon Hayward, Aaron Baines, Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand. Boston Barber and Tattoo, it's more than just Boston's most well-known corner barber shop. It's also a tourist attraction for the hundreds of thousands of people that visit the North End throughout the year. Boston Barber and Tattoo, a North End landmark that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core, located at 113 Salem Street. All right, let's get back to Sean. The league on the whole, Sean, over the last few weeks, we've been, getting different news as it relates to college and one and done rule or rule changes like the shot clock and when it resets and different things like that. And we can, by all means, if you have thoughts on that, you can expand upon them. But one thing that I just found interesting, and this is the most recent, the league announced a rule change that players are going to be able to basically be more expressive on the court. They can wear sneakers of any color at any point during the year, which clearly this is not a big deal as it relates to the game itself, but the game on a national, global popularity type of way. It's another sign that the NBA just gets it, while leagues like the NFL don't so clearly. I mean, finding guys for wearing pink sneakers at the wrong time of the year in support of breast cancer research, that type of thing. I just think this is another example of Adam Silver showing just how good a job he's doing in this role as commissioner.
Yeah, and when I first started doing this was about 18, 19 years ago. And if you think back to then, and if folks don't remember, then I invite you to do some Googling because, that's when David Stern came in with the dress code and everybody was concerned about these tattoos that players had and how they were presenting themselves. And there was all sorts of cringing about, Allen Iverson being the face of the league after Michael Jordan retired. And is that something that's going to scare off fans? So there was this whole dress code thing, and there was all this stuff that was put in. And what's been really good with Adam Silver is that he's undone a lot of the things that David Stern did in terms of that. Now, part of that, Adam Silver's been very, very lucky because he's walking into a league that has been sort of the LeBron league. And however you feel about LeBron as a player, he has really elevated the league in terms of how the players interact with fans, how the players interact with the media. He has made the league a much more likable place, and guys like Dwayne Wade, have sort of followed suit. So I think in general, it's been a little easier for Adam Silver, but certainly he's done very well to be attuned to what players want and how that relates to fans and how fans receive that sort of thing. That was not the case if you go back 15, 20 years, and so it's nice to see Adam Silver in a position to undo a lot of those things that were done during David Stern's tenure.
Before I let you go, we were talking a bit off the air. You've been working on some 2019 draft coverage because obviously never too early, and the Celtics could conceivably have 4 first-rounders, couple in the lottery even, depending on how all the ping-pong balls bounce. I don't think that's realistic, but it is something that mathematically could come to fruition. What are you working on? What are some of the names we should know? Bring us up to speed here.
Yeah, it is interesting because the Celtics, I think they've got a pretty good shot at the Memphis pick, which would be between 9 and 14. I think Memphis is going to try to they're not tanking. They're going to try to make the playoffs. I don't think they'll quite get there. So you could imagine them winding up, 11, 12, 13, and the Celtics getting that pick. And then, of course, there's the Sacramento pick, which is protected for number 1. I don't think Sacramento is going to be a very good team. So, yeah, certainly there's a chance that the Celtics come away with 2 lottery picks. I think the big story about next year's draft is going to be the Duke guys, the 3 guys. R.J. Barrett is probably the best player who will be available for the draft next year. We'll see if that plays out. But he's got teammates in Zion Williamson and Cameron Reddish, who both need the ball. And so, these are 3 potential top 10 picks, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they're able to really make that work, or if somebody winds up being the odd man out, if somebody slips in the draft because of it. So that to me is one interesting thing. And then Adam, I can't believe I'm saying this, but there might not be a Kentucky player drafted in the first round. I don't know that I can't remember the last time I've ever seen that. So that's certainly something that bears watching. Also, some pretty good international guys to keep an eye on. Sekou Doumbouya, who really made a name for himself back in February at the Hoop Summit. He's going to be playing in France. If you're watching some international ball or keeping track of the stats, keep an eye on his team in France because he's a guy who has a potential to be a top 10 pick as well.
It's funny. It's only just occurring to me, actually. I think the last time that I had you on the show was during March Madness, somewhere in the tournament. So we were still a little ways out from the draft, clearly. But one of the things that I asked you was, who do you think the Celtics should be targeting if they happen to have a later pick? And we didn't know how the ping pong balls were going to bounce for them at that point, if maybe they'd wind up with a nice early pick. But obviously that didn't happen. But the name that you mentioned, which really stuck with me and I agreed with because I loved the player, was Mo Wagner at Michigan. And as it turns out, I'm sitting there and I'm watching the draft, and I was so pissed that that he didn't fall to them. He went like 2 picks earlier, or whatever it was, 3 picks earlier.
The Lakers, yep.
Right. And of course, they wind up with Robert Williams, and we'll see how he winds up fitting here. But I really do think Wagner's going to be a good pro. I think even more than that, I think he would have been a great fit with the C's.
Yeah, exactly, because that stretch 4 role. Morris is obviously a pretty streaky guy, and you could have somebody who's a more reliable 3-point shooter. I think that's something that the Celtics would like to have going forward. So, he would have been a nice fit for them. I'm interested to see what happens with Big Bob Williams. Obviously a very, very talented guy, but every issue that he had that teams are worried about, it took him about a week to show every one of those red flags.
All of them, whether injury, laziness, tardiness, everything.
I know. I was talking to his agent, and he said, "Well, we got nowhere to go but up." So that's a good way to look at it.
Well, I think for now we have to call him, Big. Don't call me Bob Williams, because he made it quite clear he does not want. It's not Bob. It's just Robert. I don't know if maybe there's a Rob in there, Robbie, but definitely not Bob. He does not seem to be a fan of that.
He doesn't like Bob, no.
Well, there go all the what about Bob jokes. All right. Well, Sean Deveney, I appreciate the time as always. We'll do it again soon.
All right, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Sean. Terrific stuff, as always. Always enjoyed chatting with him, having him on the show, and I want to hear more from you guys. So, again, get me on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman. You can always find me there. I'm always up for a lively NBA debate with a special focus on the Celtics. I can't believe the season's so close. We're actually getting there, people. Episode 278 featuring Sean Deveney from the Sporting News, brought to you by RX Bar. My listeners get 25% off their first order by going to rxbar.com/CelticsBeat. Thanks also to Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. So again, not just Sean, not just you, thanks to Larry, to Nick, to Evan, to John, to everybody else at CLNS Media, but mostly you for listening, because if you don't, we wouldn't have a show, or we'd just be talking to, space. Nobody. Nothingness. Then I'd just be wasting my time. I don't like to do that. I do like to watch the Celtics, and we're going to all get a chance to do that very, very soon. You know what? We should have a watch party. Something like that. Just thinking outside the box. What can I say? Gino inspires me. Talk to you soon.